might have seen a video that I made last month where I spoke about what I think Forza Horizon 6 could learn from Forza Horizon 5. I basically went in and spoke about the positives and the negatives of FH5 and some of the things that I think could be improved upon for the next game. Anyways, in that video, I got a lot of comments from you guys like this. Nothing. FH6 needs to be a complete series reboot as it's badly needed. This comment has almost 500 likes, so if you think that, you are definitely not alone. But does it need a complete reboot? Well, that is what we're going to talk about today. Real quick though, before we do jump into that, we just dropped some brand new AR12 stickers. Like this, the super cool driver's card featuring the GR86 race car. If you drive something super slow, we just dropped a D100 class sticker for the first time ever. And yes, the skill issue decals are back in stock. Every sticker on the website has free shipping anywhere in the world, so go check it out now. There's a link in the description down below. Anyways, back to the Forza Horizon 6 series reboot. That is a massive request. Literally, it is one of the biggest undertakings any developer can go through. That is also going to have massive consequences. For one, your release date is going to be pushed way down the line. Not to mention, the game would also see a massive reduction in the content itself in the game. When GT6 was rebooted as GT Sport, they went from like 1,200 cars to like 300 cars or something like that. All this to say, a series reboot is a massive undertaking. And if any game developer is going to consider it, I think there are two questions that you need pretty much at the top of your list. Number one, was the previous game a financial success? Did the previous game make enough money? If the answer is yes, on one hand, you've got all of this money, so maybe you can go out and invest in that series reboot. But on the other hand, why would you change what is clearly working? That's where I stand. And number two, of the people who actually purchased the game, did they engage with it? Did they enjoy it? And again, that begs the question, why would you change what is already working? Well, in today's video, I'm gonna do my best to answer both of those questions using some publicly available analytics, and I think some of the numbers behind the scenes might blow your mind. Number one, did Forza Horizon 5 make enough money? Was it a financial success? In short, absolutely. Forza Horizon 5 is without a doubt the most successful Forza game ever made. A website called Gamelytic takes into account all of the Steam players for Forza Horizon 5. We're not talking about Xbox just yet. We're not talking about the Microsoft Store just yet. We're just talking about Steam. Steam copies sold are estimated at 5.2 million copies. Revenues in excess of $170 million. Review scores are 87% positive, and daily active players peak at 30,000 players. That is mind-blowing, and that doesn't even take into account Game Pass users or Xbox players. If you want to figure out how many Xbox players there are, we need to do a little bit of math, and I was not the right person to do some math. That's where Equinox comes in. He's a fellow content creator. We actually went out to Vegas together. Very awesome dude. Lovely. Equinox was able to go through the Forza Motorsport Rivals leaderboard and calculate every single unique name on that list. He calculated that there were approximately 87,000 unique players on that leaderboard. And what you can do with Forza Motorsport is really interesting, because there's an achievement that unlocks when you set a Rivals leaderboard time. And as it turns out, 7% of all players who have played Forza Motorsport have unlocked that achievement, aka 87,000 players. Doing a little bit of reverse math, you can then extrapolate that there are 1.1 million unique Forza Motorsport players. And if you go back to Gamelytic and compare that 1.1 million player base number to how many players are on Forza Motorsport on Steam, that's about a 10% player base on Steam versus the Xbox and Microsoft Store. If we then assume that Forza Horizon and Forza Motorsport run similar sorts of player base like numbers, so you have 10% of your players on Steam and 90% of your players on Xbox / Game Pass / the Microsoft Store, Forza Horizon 5 has some truly mind-blowing numbers. Obviously, these are just estimates, but let me blow your mind real quick. That would mean every single day, Forza Horizon 5 is peaking at between 60 to 200,000 players during the day. That's a peak. That's not unique players. Unique players would be a lot more than that. During the entire month, the game would be peaking at 270,000 players to 300,000 players on the game at any given point. After you add everything up, though, and assuming you use that same 90-10 split that we were talking about before, for FH5, you get roughly 50 million players, which does seem a little bit high, especially when you compare it to the Horizon Hall of Fame leaderboard, which at the time of recording this video is roughly 38 million players. That would tell us for Forza Horizon 5, our player base split is probably nearer 85 to 15%, instead of that 90 to 10%. I would assume the reason for that is just because Forza Horizon has been out for a lot longer than Forza Motorsport has, and because of that, it's probably gone through more Steam sales than Forza Motorsport has, and because of that, you probably had players pick up the game and try it out who wouldn't have necessarily tried it out, bumping up that player base split by a couple of percentage points. At least that's what I... Regardless, though, those numbers are mind-blowing. And let me just talk in very round numbers here, because it's even crazier when you start to think about it. Let's just talk in very round numbers for a second, though. Assuming Forza Horizon 5 has 38 million players right now, let's attribute 6 million of those players to Steam. Right now, the estimate's 5.2, but let's just say 6 to make it easier for ourselves. That leaves us with 32 million players on Xbox and Microsoft. Let's assume that 25 million of those players are Game Pass players. That still leaves you with 12 million, 13 million copies sold of this game. Let me just put that in frame of reference for you, because the numbers are so big, they kind of don't mean anything. Need for Speed Most Wanted is sometimes regarded as one of the most popular racing games ever made. Estimates put it anywhere between 15 to 20 million copies sold. Assuming Forza Horizon 5 is sold between 10 and 13 million copies, and then has an additional 25 million Game Pass players, that's crazy. This is one of the most popular racing games ever made. I know I just threw a bunch of numbers at you, but long story short, was Forza Horizon 5 a financial success? Absolutely. So if you look at it from that perspective, for a game that has sold so many copies and has had so many players, why would you change something that is clearly working? And I know what you might answer to that. Are the players who are playing the game actually enjoying it? Are the people having the feeling that the developers intended? Well, that's really hard to measure, but player engagement, we can measure. Again, Equinox put together this fantastic spreadsheet that uses the total number of players in Forza Horizon 5 and compares it to the percentage of players who have unlocked certain achievements. And using that, we can kind of figure out how long people are playing for and what they're actually doing in the game. Only 25 million of them have arrived at the Horizon Festival. You know how when you drop into the game for the first time, you have to drive like the 4 cars, and when you're in the AMG 1, you arrive at the Horizon Festival? Only 25 million of those players actually got there. While you're playing through the intro of the game, you actually unlock a second achievement fairly quickly. You know when you're driving Ken Block's Hoonigan Ford Escort, that blue one where you're racing like the plane and then they turn into bikes and stuff? Only 20 million players have reached that portion of the game. So you had 25 million players make it to the Horizon Festival, but then you drop 5 million between that little increment right there. A lot of those players are probably those Game Pass players who haven't paid for the game and didn't know what they were getting into, jumped into the game and went, no, this isn't for me. Let's back out right away. It still counts them as a player, but they didn't get too far. I would assume for a game on Game Pass, that's fairly standard. You obviously start out with 100% player engagement. But then as like people jump in and go, oh, no, this isn't for me. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. It still counts them as a player, but those players drop off pretty quickly. But as time goes on, that level of players definitely starts to flatline somewhere. And you can see that in these analytics. For example, 30% of players actually made it to a Horizon finale. You can actually go further than that. 10% of all players have made it to the Hall of Fame. That's about 3.6 million players who have gone through and put in, at the minimum, 2 hours of work, really. 5% of all players have unlocked and restored every single barn find in the game. 4% of players have purchased every single house in the game. And 3% of players have driven on every single road. I am not one of those 3%. I have not driven on every single road in this game. Again, though, all this to say, based off what I think, I don't know, right? We have nothing to compare it to. Like, we haven't done this for Forza Horizon 4 or Forza Horizon 2 or whatever, so on and so forth. I don't know if you ask me, but I think that's a pretty good engagement rate. I know some players might feel like certain things in the game aren't exactly what they want. And I know some players will always want more and never be satisfied with what they have. And don't get me wrong, Forza Horizon 5 definitely has its shortcomings. The map, for one, is probably one of the weaker points. But if you're one of those people asking for a full series reboot, I think you're going to be disappointed because I don't think it's going to be happening. I think at the most, maybe the developers take an extra year to develop the game and let it cook so they can come out at launch swinging and nail a launch window. Those are some of the analytics, some of the estimates. Huge shout out to Equinox for putting together and running all of these numbers. Wouldn't be possible without him. And I know some people may not like to hear it, but Forza Horizon 5 has been a massive success. The developers certainly know what they're doing, and I can't wait to hear about Forza Horizon 6, hopefully soon.